In this video, we're going to review how to take the pattern from Weaving on 3 Shafts by Erica Reuter. And we're going to look at page 7, Rose Path and Diamond Twill. And the variation that we're going to look at is actually on page 8. It's this one here. I have already woven some material in this pattern, so you'll be able to see the final design, but there's also examples down here on the bottom of the book. Now this is a 3-shaft pattern booklet, which means you have to have 2 shafts on your rigid Heddle loom in order to complete these designs. If you think about the 3 shafts, one is going to not be in the holes of either. One will be in the hole of the first shaft and one will be in the hole of the second shaft. And I say shafts, I mean heddles, and vice versa. So you can't do a 4-shaft pattern with 2 heddles. You can only do one more shaft or heddle than what you have, because you have the ability to go up and down. So the third set of strings, they'll go through the slots on both the first and second heddle. So in order to get those strings in the open shed position, you put the first 2 heddles either down or up, depending on how your pattern is set up.
When we look at a pattern, it looks like grid paper. Each black square represents a string in the pattern. This pattern has a repeat of 20 strings, so you would repeat that for the duration of the warp. I recommend that you use a 12.5 dent rigid Heddle with an 8/2 cotton warp. The width is adjustable in multiples of 20 plus 1 at the very end to ensure that you form a full diamond at the very end of the pattern. So for example, if you wanted the pattern to repeat 3 times, you would take 3 times 20, which is 60, and then add 1, 61. You would need 61 threads for the pattern. For each pattern, you will create a key to assign the appropriate heddle. With 2 heddles, you have the ability to create a 3-shaft pattern by way of engaging the first heddle, disengaging both heddles, and then engaging the second heddle. Be aware that you must assign the row with the most threads to the positions of both heddles down. This will ensure that your spacing in the reed is consistent and also protect you from tension issues down the road. So when we convert a pattern, it is easiest to draw out our slots and holes of the rigid heddle like seen here. Then we draw the string through in the way that it is to be warped. Strings on the bottom diagram that are assigned to the first row on the pattern go through the second heddle slot and the first heddle hole. Now remember, if you're warping, generally you're warping from back to front. So when you draw the string through, you're going to draw the string through the second heddle first and then the first heddle second. The first heddle is the heddle that is sitting closest to you when you're looking at your loom. Strings that are assigned to the second row on the pattern, based off of our key, need to go through both slots on the first and second heddle. To engage this row when we're weaving, we're going to have both of the heddles down. And then strings that are assigned to the third row on the pattern go through the hole on the second heddle and then through the slot on the first heddle. Let's draw out our pattern. So we're going to go ahead and practice going through this laying or warping process. And remember that our strings that are on our first row are going to go through the slot of the second heddle and the hole of the first. The strings on this row here, the second row, are going to go through the slots on both heddles, and then the pattern on this row, the strings in this row, the ones that are black here, are going to go through the hole on the second and the slot on the first. So when we look at our first string, it's going to go through the first hole and then the slot on the second. And that's what's shown here, and then we'll do both slots for the next string. Then the next string is through the hole of the second heddle and the slot of the first. And then through the first heddle, slots on both, through the second heddle and slot on the first, through the slot, and then on this one you'll notice we're on the slot here and then the slot here, so there are 3 strings here together. Then we have the slot and then a hole on the first, hole on the second, slot, 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 hole, slot, slot, and you'll notice here there's also 3 strings in here in that one. And then we have hole to slot, slot to hole, slot to slot, hole to slot, slot to slot, and so you'll see this one is also 3, slot to hole, hole to slot, slot to slot, slot to hole, slot to slot, hole to slot, slot to hole, and slot to slot. So if you follow this pattern, you'll notice that the top here, this part here, and this part here is where you're going to see 3 strings. Here, here, and here on your pattern.
This is what the pattern looks like. So this is the diamond pattern. Now the really cool thing on a rigid Heddle loom is you can reverse it. You can go forwards, you can put the reverse side on the top side, and you can mess around with that by playing around with the treadling pattern. So in this case I was doing 1 up, both down, second up, and in this case I was doing 1 down, both up, second one down. So you can get the reverse side, this is the reverse side, on the top side of your fabric, which is really, it's an additional pattern that you can do. And then colors, of course. This lime green wasn't my favorite, but that's what I had. So this is just the same pattern over and over again, and this one, you know, I did stripes and I flipped it, and this one I did the same thing. I flipped, but and I also did, I think I did some zigzags in these two. I think the zigzag portion was actually right here, so it's not super visible, but you can sort of see the pattern that way. So that is my little guide on how to put together a rigid Heddle pattern from the pattern book.